Thomas Hobbes, a 17th century English philosopher, once said that man is not naturally good, but naturally a selfish hedonist. Some philosophers and their thoughts on the role of compassion in society have been unforgiving and pessimistic. In addition, social science is littered with literature and philosophies on how self-interest is driving life and society forward. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, puts self-interest front and center when he states that self-interest dictates a competitive economy and allows all individuals to perform their best to increase their own personal gain. Throughout history, egoistic behavior is not only considered the basis for natural order, but is also the foundation of modern economics and capitalism. In fact, philosophers like Hobbes have even believed that comforting acts directed towards others are actually driven by selfish desires. So, in this regard, is there any real basis for compassion and altruism? Are we as humans actually not compassionate beings? But before we answer those questions, let us raise up a few more fundamental questions. Like, what exactly is compassion? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines compassion as sympathetic consciousness of others' distress with a desire to alleviate it. So in other words, it's the feelings that come from within oneself to show sympathy and care for others that are in discomfort. However, is compassion truly rooted in our brains, or is the love we show all fake and insincere? In a scientific study conducted at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, neuroscientist Jack Mishk and his fellow researchers studied 6 new mothers. Mothers brought their infant babies for photo shoots, and then 6 weeks later, these mothers went through fMRI scans while being shown a mix of pictures, ranging from their own babies to other children and to even other adults. Interestingly, every time mothers saw a picture of their own baby, not only did they report a positive feeling, but a specific part of their brain lit up, the orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC for short. The OFC plays a critical role in the reward system as it rewards mothers with that positive feeling that they just experienced. This study, and many similar studies, has cemented our understanding that compassion for our blood relatives and our own offsprings are deeply rooted in our brains. However, according to the definition, true compassion and altruism are supposed to be directed towards complete strangers. So, is there any evolutionary or scientific basis to support this claim? In a separate study, Dr. James Reiling, a professor of anthropology at Emory University, conducted several experiments on people playing the iterated prisoner's dilemma game, while also undergoing fMRI scans. These games were either played against a stranger or a computer simulation. And in the prisoner's dilemma game, people can either choose to cooperate or defect, and get rewarded differently based on what the other person chose. So, for example, both players will win $2 if they both choose to cooperate. However, if one player chooses to defect while the other player chooses to cooperate, the defector will win $3 while the cooperator wins nothing. And finally, if both players choose to defect, each player will just win $1. So clearly, the returns are stacked highest to encourage selfish defection while making your opponent think that you're trying to cooperate. And these games are played for over 20 rounds, so players can learn from one another, and so that they can decide if they want to choose to cooperate or defect in future rounds. Interestingly, this study found that despite being complete strangers, most people actually preferred to cooperate and benefit each other than to cheat the opponent out for selfish gains. This same level of cooperation was not observed when people knew that they were reversing against a computer. This study highlights the reciprocal nature of cooperation. People feel rewarded if they feel like their cooperation will be reciprocated in some way back to them. And not surprisingly, our old friend, the orbitofrontal cortex, lit up every single time a person chose to cooperate. So now we can safely conclude that we as humans are indeed naturally compassionate beings. But are we an altruistic society? Altruism is defined as a behavior an animal takes that is not necessarily beneficial to itself, but benefits others of its species. So in other words, it's an unselfish act for the benefit of others. So this leads me to the most important question of this talk. How can we harness the natural compassionate emotions that we as humans possess to create a more altruistic society? Unknowing of a solution, I lingered on this question for a while. During this time, I was volunteering at George Marks Children's House. George Marks is the first pediatric palliative and hospice care in the nation, focusing on supporting terminally ill children. Palliative care focuses on providing relief from both the symptoms and the stress of the illness, with an overall goal of improving the quality of life for both the child and their families. On December 11th, 2022, a 2-year-old patient at George Marks passed away. It was only my second volunteer shift, and as a result, I was never able to meet this child or even learn his name. Nevertheless, this experience left me devastated and made me retreat emotionally. I struggled to form meaningful bonds with the other patients at George Marks because I feared the inevitable pain that came with losing a loved one. A few weeks later, a new patient at George Marks was admitted. Let's call him Bob. It was my duty to spend time with Bob, either by playing various games or just by providing companionship. So, for example, Bob loved floor time and reading. So I followed him as he crawled through the maze-like corridors of the house and read books to him by Eric Carle and Dr. Seuss as he dozed off. However, I still felt as if something was holding me back from becoming close to Bob. I feared that losing him would hurt me more if I was closer to him than if I was more distant. However, I soon realized that I was contradicting myself. It was selfish to distance myself away from Bob just because I was afraid of losing him. Instead of worrying about the future and myself, I had to worry about the present and focus on making Bob's current moments the best that they could possibly be. After about a year of volunteering at George Marks, I was under the influence that I was helping the children at George Marks, but in reality, they helped me. The children at George Marks are the perfect demonstrators of bridging compassionate emotions with altruistic actions. Their contagious laughs, their heartwarming smiles, and innocent gestures are all inadvertently driven by their compassionate emotions, thus creating a more altruistic society. So, if you're going to take anything away from this talk, it is this. Help create a more altruistic society by just sharing a smile, talking to others, or by expressing a selfless gesture to show that we are all here for one another. To quote Andrew Jackson, "One man or woman with courage can make a majority." So your actions are a crucial step forward to creating a more altruistic society and improving the Irvington community. Thank you for listening to my talk.